All right, let's dive in. We're going to look under the hood of our own minds to figure out the strange and, let's be honest, often irrational relationship we all have with money. I mean, why do we treat some dollars completely differently than others? Well, let's find out.
Seriously, think about it. You find a $100 bill on the street. Now, compare that to $100 you earned from a long week at work. Logically, it's the same amount of money, right? $100 is $100, but it doesn't feel the same, does it? No way. That found money, that feels like a free pass, bonus cash you can spend on something fun. But the money you earned, that feels serious. That's for bills, for savings. This one little puzzle, well, it's the key to unlocking the entire hidden psychology of our financial lives.
So it turns out deep down, your brain is running on this set of, well, invisible rules about money. It's like you've got this secret financial rule book that you didn't write, you might not even know it exists, but it dictates your decisions every single day. And the first rule in that book, it's a big one. Yeah, behavioral economists have a name for this. They call it mental accounting. It's basically our brain's quirky little habit of putting money into different buckets. We create all these mental accounts, right? Like this is the vacation fund, this is the groceries money, this is the emergency stash, and we treat the money in each of those buckets completely differently, even though, you guessed it, it's all just money. And this usually breaks down into two main types of accounts. On one hand, you've got what we can call happy money. This is the fun stuff. Windfalls, gifts, that $100 you found on the sidewalk. We feel totally free to spend that on treats or something indulgent. But then there's the unhappy money. This is our hard-earned salary, and we've already mentally earmarked it for the serious stuff like rent and savings. It's the exact same cash, but our brain gives it a completely different job description. And, these aren't just one-off little quirks. They're actually part of a much bigger framework called money scripts. Think of these as the deeply ingrained beliefs about money that we soak up, often without even realizing it, from our families and our experiences when we're kids. They are literally the stories we tell ourselves about what money is for, and they're running in the background of our minds, shaping pretty much everything. Okay, so we've got our personal money scripts, but the story gets even bigger from here, because it's not just about your personal rules, it's about how all of our brains are fundamentally wired. You see, for the longest time, traditional economic theories were built on this idea that we're all rational, that we always make logical financial choices to maximize our outcomes. But then behavioral economics came along and basically said, hold on a second. By looking at how people actually behave, we found out we're not just irrational sometimes. We are systematically and predictably irrational. Our brains come with built-in glitches. So let's look at three of the biggest culprits here. First up is loss aversion. This is that feeling where losing, say, $100 hurts about twice as much as the pleasure you get from gaining $100. It's why we're so afraid to lose. Next, you've got overconfidence. This is that little voice in our head that says, oh yeah, I can totally beat the market. It's the belief that we're way better at this stuff than we really are. And finally, herd behavior. This one's huge. It's that powerful, almost magnetic pull to just do what everyone else is doing, whether that's buying into a hot stock or panic selling when everyone else does.
Now check out this number, 45%. What in the world could this represent? Well, it's the direct, measurable cost of one of those biases we just talked about.
It turns out, studies show that investors who are overconfident trade a whopping 45% more often than their peers. And all that extra activity, all that buying and selling based on a hunch, it doesn't lead to better results. In fact, it almost always leads to lower returns because of transaction fees and just plain bad timing. That right there is the price you pay for a cognitive bias. But biases aren't the only thing going on in our heads. There's an even more powerful force that can completely hijack our thinking, especially when money gets tight. It's called the scarcity trap. And this isn't just a mindset. It physically changes how well our brains can perform. This quote from the author Stephanie Land, wow, it just captures the mental weight of scarcity perfectly. It's not just about not having enough money. It's that the constant worry, the endless mental math, it becomes all-consuming, and that constant stress creates a massive load on our brain. So naturally, researchers wanted to try and measure this effect. They came up with this really clever study to test the cognitive function of low-income folks at two very different times. First, right after they got paid, when money was less of an immediate worry, and then again, right before their next paycheck, when things were the tightest. And what they found at first was, well, kind of nothing. It was surprising. When you average all the data together, the difference in performance on cognitive tests between before payday and after payday seemed pretty small, almost non-existent. It looked like a dead end. But the picture changes dramatically when you zoom in. The researchers reanalyzed the data, not just looking at before and after, but at the specific number of days until payday. And suddenly, a super clear pattern emerged. About 5 days out from getting paid, you start to see this real, measurable drop in cognitive performance. And then, in those last few days, right before the money hits their account, performance just falls off a cliff. It plummets. As that financial pressure peaks, cognitive function tanks. And let's be clear, this has nothing to do with intelligence or ability. It's about the crushing mental burden of just trying to make ends meet. So here's the crucial point. This scarcity mindset acts like a tax on our mental resources. Think about it. We all have a limited amount of cognitive bandwidth every day. When the worry about money starts eating up that bandwidth, it leaves less room for everything else, for focus, for long-term planning, and even for self-control. Okay, so we've seen how these forces work inside one person's mind, but what happens when you multiply that by millions and millions of people? Well, the result is that our individual brain wiring actually has the power to shake the entire global economy. It really works like a chain reaction. Step 1. It all starts with one person making an irrational choice, maybe based on that overconfidence we talked about. Step 2. Herd behavior kicks in. Others see what's happening and they follow along, not because of their own research, but just because everyone else is doing it. And step 3. This amplifies that initial mistake. When that happens on a massive scale, it can inflate huge market bubbles, think dot-com boom, and can even trigger major financial crashes. So after going through everything from mental accounting to full-blown market crashes, what are the key takeaways here? What should we remember from all this?
All right, let's just quickly recap the 4 crucial points. First, our brains don't treat all money the same. We create these mental accounts for it. Second, we are all wired with universal biases that make us, well, predictably irrational. Third, financial stress is like a powerful cognitive tax that literally drains our mental resources. And finally, all these little individual psychological quirks, when you multiply them across millions of people, are powerful enough to move global markets. It's pretty amazing.
And the big takeaway here really isn't that you need to try and become some perfectly rational economic robot. I mean, that's impossible. The real power comes from simply being aware of these hidden forces. Just understanding your own biases is the first and, honestly, the most important step to making better, more conscious decisions with your money. So that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Now that you know your brain has its own secret rulebook for money, which one of those rules are you going to question first?